Episode 2, Magnetic but Misaligned. Chapter 1, Smoke, Cards, and a Smile Like a Secret. The poker event wasn't advertised so much as rumored, a late-night game above a shuttered tailor shop where the neon scissor sign flickered between languages. Arya came because a friend texted her a photo of a velvet rope and the words "bet you won't." She rarely said no to a dare, especially one wrapped in mystery. Inside, the room was a cinematic slice of midnight, lamps with crimson shades, brass ashtrays, low jazz floating from a hidden speaker. The air smelled like citrus peel and cardstock. A long table anchored the center, felt green as spring, stacks of chips glinting like tame constellations. That's when she saw him. He was dealing with one hand idly as if his fingers had memorized the mathematics of chance. Black shirt, sleeves rolled, a watch that looked inherited rather than purchased, hair too careful to be careless. His eyes lifted and found her before she finished crossing the room, dark, amused, interested without announcing interest. "Seat open?" she asked, not because she needed permission, but because she liked to hear how people said yes. "For someone who walks like she intends to win," he said, sliding a chair back with his foot. "Always." "Arya." "Rafe," he said, the name fit his stillness. She bought in, cards thudded, chips chimed, the table's small theater resumed around them. Rafe didn't try to charm her. He watched, cataloging a hunter surveying wind. When she bluff-raised him early just to draw a reaction, he tilted his head, almost smiling. He folded without comment, and she felt the spark of an equal. Between hands, he poured them both a measure of dark, peaty whiskey. "You play fast," he said. "I live fast," she replied. "Playing is just practice." "Practice for what?" She let the question hang, her grin something sharp. "Everything." His gaze held hers a second too long. The air hummed as if the lamp wires had warmed. The others around the table blurred into background noise. By midnight they were trading pots and small provocations. By 1 they were trading glances that felt like wagers. At 2, when she stood to leave, he stood too, like a shadow attached to the decision. "Nightcap?" he asked. It wasn't a question that expected no. "Surprise me." She liked testing the confidence of men who sounded certain. He didn't take her to a bar, he took her to the roof. The city was a spread of upturned jewelry, the wind smelled like rain and metal. He handed her a flask with a fox engraved on it. "To practice," he said. "To everything," she corrected, sipping. The whiskey burned like good news. Their kiss arrived like a card turned over, inevitable once revealed. He kissed like he calculated, focused, slow at first, then all in. Her hand slid to his jaw, his found the small of her back, guiding her closer, testing and then claiming. The night tightened around them as if it had been waiting. When they separated, breath fogging in twin ghosts, he smiled slightly, that secret again. "I'd like to see you when the sun's awake." "Then don't sleep," she said, and he laughed, a quiet, pleased sound that felt like a marker laid on felt. Chapter 2, Fire Meets Undertow. They chose her apartment and didn't bother with pretense. The door clicked, the city dimmed to a suggestion, and the rest of the world surrendered its claim. Rafe had the kind of attention that turned hunger into ritual. He took her jacket as if undressing were a ceremony, fingers sliding the zipper with a patience that made anticipation throb in her mouth. When he kissed her again, it was deeper, practiced restraint burning off in layers. He tasted like whiskey and the cool air of rooftops. She pressed him back against the wall, loving the way he absorbed force and gave it back as focus. "Control freak," she teased, brushing his collarbone with her knuckles. "Only when it matters," he said, and nipped her lip, a calibration of pressure that made her breath hitch. They navigated each other like a map found at the bottom of a drawer, worn in the right places, still full of unmarked territory. He didn't rush foreplay, he luxuriated in it. He learned her pace, then bent it, then matched it, never quite letting her anticipate the next beat. She responded with unguarded clarity. More, there, yes, the vocabulary of a woman who knows her body and trusts it. When they finally shed the last of their clothes, the electric curiosity between them snapped into voltage. He lifted her, strength quiet rather than showy, and carried her to the bedroom as if the path were preordained. The way he looked at her, eyes narrowed, mouth curved, filled her with a hot, focused thrill. Not possession, not worship, something closer to recognition. Predator greeting predator. Their bodies found a rhythm that felt like matched storms. He drove her to the edge and held her there, hovering in that exquisite ache. She pulled him over the edge and rode the drop, laughing into his neck as he groaned. The sounds they made weren't polite, low, rough, honest. He was generous without becoming gentle. She was fierce without losing tenderness. When she arched and shattered, he followed a heartbeat later, the tremor running through him like a fuse. They lay panting, the room pulsing in time with their chests. She looked over, already grinning. Addictive, he murmured, not a compliment so much as a diagnosis. She smirked, dangerous. Usually the same thing. She thought of warning signs, she thought of running toward them anyway. Deal me in, she said. His answering smile contained a promise and a dare. Gladly. Chapter 3, The Rules We Don't Admit We're Playing. They became a study in polarity, days that burned like desert noon, nights that swelled like undertow. He texted sparsely but with precision, a photo of a fox, the word later, a pin drop with roof. She responded with speed and flame. Now, where? Bring the flask. Their thread glowed with efficient hunger. He curated their encounters, a speakeasy behind a florist, a midnight swim at a hotel pool they didn't belong to, a gallery after hours where they stood nose to canvas before an oil of a storm at sea. You like dangerous margins, he observed. You like doors with locks only you can pick, she shot back. He didn't argue. They were brilliant in bed or on a couch, a counter, a stairwell at a party where the laughter sounded like a different planet. Physical compatibility can feel like fate if you let it. They let it a little too often. He could read her body like a marked deck. She could take control mid-hand and change the game. He liked blindfolding her, not to disorient, but to sharpen attention. She liked taking his wrists and pinning them, testing how much surrender a man of refusals could manage. They both liked the moment when the power balance flipped and flipped again, a metronome set between demand and gift. Somewhere between victories, the other game began. He went dark for a day without warning, then reappeared with a crooked smile and kisses that tasted like apology without the word. She laughed it off the first time, busy with her own orbit, but she noted it. He deflected questions with compliments. She deflected uncertainty with candor. After sex, he asked questions that probed, surgical. She answered too fast and realized later she'd told him more than he'd told her. Once over late ramen, she said it plainly. You switch the lights on and off. He twirled noodles, unbothered. Sometimes the dark is where you see best. I'm not a bat, she said lightly, but something in her bristled. She wanted clarity like clean air. He offered clarity like a privilege. And yet the magnetism, when she tried to keep her distance, a day or two of stubborn independence, his absence swelled until it buzzed under her ribs. When he did appear, the room snapped into focus as if someone had adjusted a lens. She told herself it was a phase, an experiment. She told herself she wasn't a lab. He learned her tells at the table, she learned his in the world. When he locked his jaw at the mention of family, it meant the conversation would turn. When his thumb stroked the rim of a glass, it meant he was calculating. When he took her chin gently after an argument and said, "Come here," it meant the argument had become a prelude. Trust for both of them began to look like a bluff you keep making until someone calls it. Chapter 4, The Beautiful Violence of Want. They booked a weekend at a boutique hotel 2 towns over, brick walls, rain on the window, a bed that looked like a held breath. The plan, his, was to unplug, the impulse, hers, was to overheat. They didn't leave the room until noon. He set the pace, slow and inexorable as the tide, mouth on her shoulder, down her sternum, pausing long enough to make her argue with air. When she tried to flip him, he let her and then took the reins back with a movement so economical it felt like sorcery. He liked testing her patience. She liked demolishing his control and seeing what lived under it. Every new angle yielded a new answer. They managed the difficult trick of being utterly selfish and utterly attentive at once. In the pause between their bodies' conversations, words wandered in. On the pillow, eyelids heavy, she said, "I want to know the parts of you no one else sees." He watched her, unreadable. "That's the only part that matters, isn't it?" "So show me," she said, simple. He smiled, but it was a smile with guards. "I prefer to read you." Something irritated her then, like grit in an oyster. "You play games," she said softly. "You care about control more than you care about being known." He rolled to his back, eyes on the ceiling. "I've known people who wanted to know me mostly to rearrange me." "I'm not an interior decorator." She propped herself on an elbow, annoyance lighting her voice. "I don't want a better you, I want the true one." He turned back, palm cupping her jaw, thumb brushing her lower lip. The touch dissolved annoyance the way flame licks sugar. You want to know because you need mastery. You can't stand not winning. And you can't stand being transparent, she retorted, a little breathless as his thumb dragged heat. Transparency can be a weapon when you hand it to the wrong person, he said, and kissed her softly, as if that were the end of the debate. It was not, but they shelved it because the need underneath argument demanded attention. He closed his teeth lightly on her shoulder. She gasped and laughed and grabbed his hair, and the conversation burned down to embers beneath a hotter fire. Later, room dark and rain louder, she curled into his chest, satisfied and restless. "Promise me something," she murmured. "I don't make promises," he said, not unkindly. She lay awake longer than she admitted, cataloging the admission like a red flag pinned to a map. Chapter 5: Knives, Velvet, and the Carousel of Power. Their first real rupture came dressed like fun. Friends, cocktails, a warehouse party hung with strings of bare bulbs. Arya wore a slip the color of a dangerous sunrise. Rafe arrived late, as if lateness were a calling card, and watched from a distance for a long minute before crossing to her. The watching warmed her, the delay did not. He introduced her to a woman from work, a category he kept abstract. The woman was charming, full of razors wrapped in ribbon. Conversation danced toward the edge of flirtation. Arya matched it, not to compete, but because she liked the breeze at the cliff's lip. Rafe's hand found her lower back, possessive without pressure. After the woman wandered off, he said low, "You like testing fences." "I like knowing where the fences are," she replied, "so I don't break my neck on a surprise." He smiled, but the smile was the kind a fencer wears before a touch, or so you can break them at a time of your choosing. She took his hand and pulled him to a shadowed stairwell, tired of sentences. The kiss there was more argument than affection, and therefore, for them, perfect. His hand gripped her hip hard enough to imprint. She pushed him against the cold metal railing and took what she wanted, and he gave it, then turned the tables with a pivot she didn't see coming, pinning her wrists above her head with one hand, while the other rewrote the rules along her spine. "Say you want me," he murmured, not pleading, testing. "I always do," she snapped, surprising herself with the truth in it. "Then stop auditioning for the room," he said, and the acid of it hit the soft parts of her. She went still. He felt the change and released her wrists at once, regret flickering. "Arya." "Don't worry," she said, smiling with all her teeth. "I never audition, I headline." He recognized the danger and didn't back down. That was their problem and their intoxicant. They went home, the cab ride silent except for through traffic and thinning patience. In her apartment, the silence broke the way storms do, all at once. Words first sharp, polished, meant to wound elegantly. He accused her of needing a crowd to feel real. She accused him of needing a mirror to feel safe. He said she wanted control wrapped as freedom. She said he wanted mystery that doubled as distance. The carousel spun, pride, vulnerability, sarcasm, honest ache, repeat. When the carousel finally slowed, they were both breathing hard, almost laughing at how predictable they had become. He stepped to her without asking. She let him. The kiss was a ceasefire signed in heat. Clothes fell like truces tossed aside. The sex that followed was a ledger, a list of grievances translated into motion and answered with sensation until the paper burned. He bound her wrists loosely with his tie, then placed her hands on his chest and said, "You can break this whenever you want," a sentence that worked like a key in two locks. She did break it later when she wanted to flip him, to ride him, to set the rhythm and refused to be asked for apologies. He let her because letting was its own power. After, sweaty and shot through with a shaky tenderness that always surprised them, he brushed hair from her cheek. "I don't like sharing you with a room," he admitted. "I don't like being put in a box," she answered. They stared, knowing this wasn't solved and might be unsolvable, and kissed anyway because the alternative was honesty without anesthesia. Chapter 6: The Anatomy of Distrust. The days after the party wobbled. Rafe went quiet, then grand. He sent tickets to a string quartet in a church lit only by candles and didn't show up until the second movement. He left a note on her door that said, "Trust is a story we keep telling," and then disappeared for 30 hours. When he returned, he brought dessert and a smile like absolution. She tried to talk about it. He parried. She pressed harder. He evaded more elegantly. "What are you afraid I'll see?" she asked, sitting cross-legged on the floor while he poured tea that neither of them wanted. "My past isn't a museum," he said. "It's a salvage yard. I prefer to leave the rust where it is." I like rust, she said. It tells you where the salt is. See, he said lightly, and kissed her temple as if that were clever rather than frustrating. She began to feel the exhaustion you only feel when someone keeps pulling away the chair you're about to sit on, and yet, when he touched her, the fatigue lost its grip. He had a way of re-earning ground physically that he wouldn't hold emotionally. She resented it even as she invited it. One night, determined to unmask, she tried a different route, confession. She told him about Leo in broad strokes, softness, oatmeal, a kind of love that asked her to be still until she couldn't breathe. She admitted the guilt of leaving a good man. Rafe listened, elbow on knee, face unreadable. When she finished, he said, I won't smother you, and she realized she had handed him a blueprint. And you, she asked, what blueprint do I get? He smiled thinly, I'll let you know when the permit's clear. She laughed because the alternative was angry tears. He kissed the laughter out of her mouth. They made love with a tenderness that undid her at the edges. He seemed almost gentle then, like the man under the mask had finally stepped forward. After, when she tried to name it, this is what I mean, he rolled away to sleep, as if the topic had expired with the sweat on their skin. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, familiar ache blooming, exhausted by passion that lit fires and left ashes where answers should be. Chapter 7, The Last Hand. The end began as so many endings do, with a small betrayal dressed as an oversight. She texted him a screenshot of a climbing route she'd finally conquered, chalk dust still on her knuckles. He replied hours later with a fox emoji and later. When she called, he didn't pick up. When he called back 2 minutes after midnight, she didn't. They met on the poker roof because of course they did. The city hummed. The flask waited like a prop. He looked beautiful and tired. She felt gorgeous and done. You're mad, he said, not a question. I'm bored, she corrected, of pretending confusion is intrigue. He watched her expression softening into something almost raw. I'm not playing with you. You're always playing, it's how you stay safe. She stepped closer, invaded the space he guarded like a border. I have given you every sign in my language. You keep replying in riddles. He exhaled, you need constant control. I need honesty, she snapped, then quieter, and yes, I need to steer sometimes because I'm the one who crashes if you pull away at the last second. You crash either way, he said, a harsh tenderness in it, like a truth he hated. Then I'll crash on my terms, she swallowed, felt the sting of what was coming. I want you, but I won't keep paying interest to a vault I'm not allowed to open. He reached for her, she let him because goodbye doesn't cancel gravity. The kiss was the kind that tries to edit a future in real time, urgent, thorough, memorizing. Hands roamed, shoulders, hair, the quick map of a body you're trying to archive. They pressed against the wall where they had kissed the first night, and the circle did what circles do, closed. The sex was beautiful, complicated, charged with imminent loss. He lifted her like a vow, she met him like a dare. They moved in a rhythm that had learned both violence and mercy. She came with a sound that split and stitched her. He followed like a wave that already knew the shore. After they stood forehead to forehead, neither eager to step away. Stay, he said, the word almost unrecognizable in his mouth. Ask me something real, she replied. He flinched, the smallest tell the truest. I don't know how, he admitted, and she believed him. That was the wound under all the armor. She kissed his cheek, the corner of his mouth, the hollow where his pulse argued. Then this is the last hand, she whispered. I fold. He closed his eyes once, like a man who had expected it and hoped anyway. Chapter 8, Exit Wound, Clean Cut. She didn't ghost, she stayed long enough to make the ending real. In her apartment, she packed his toothbrush with a small ceremony that made her laugh and then nearly cry. She folded the black shirt she loved removing and laid it by the door. She wrote a note because Rafe had taught her the value of a well-placed sentence. I wanted fire that fueled, we made fire that fed on us. You are extraordinary and I'm exhausted. I choose clarity. I hope you choose something that lets you sleep. When he arrived, she was ready. He saw the shirt and the note in her face and understood, because understanding was a skill he wielded too well to pretend. He didn't make a scene, neither did she. They sat on opposite sides of the couch, the way ex-lovers do when the room is full of ghosts and the living are out of words. I'll miss you, he said, voice steady like the edge of a blade. I'll miss us, she answered, which meant the same thing and not at all. She stood. The hug was short and deep, their bodies recognizing what their minds were refusing to revise. He smelled like cedar and metal, she smelled like rain. He left with the shirt and the note and the fox-engraved flask, which felt right. After, the quiet didn't feel like victory. It felt like a room whose music had been cut mid-song. She cleaned counters that were already clean. She put fresh sheets on the bed because ritual helps. She ran hard the next morning, breath sawing, lungs burning, city blurring. Days later, on a different roof, she watched the dusk perform its slow miracle. The sky went bruised peach to violet, the first stars argued their way through the haze. She thought of Leo's steadiness and Rafe's secrets and what both had taught her, that love without oxygen suffocates and love without trust corrodes. She whispered them like axioms. Her phone buzzed, a new message from an unknown number. "You don't know me, but I loved your talk on risk at the design conference." Coffee. She smiled, not because the future had arrived, but because she had. She typed back, "Walk," and put the phone away. On the way down the stairs, she caught her reflection in a window, hair wind-tossed, eyes alert, mouth curved at the corners. A woman who had chosen clarity over addiction, flame over smoke. A pioneer whose compass was finally calibrated to true north, not to avoid getting lost, but to enjoy it differently. That night, she wrote in the notes app she'd begun after Leo and continued after Rafe. "I can love the locked door and still refuse to live on the porch. I can worship the fire and still insist that it warm me rather than burn me down. I can want the game and still demand rules we both admit to playing." She closed the app, opened the window, let the cool air flood the room. Somewhere far below, a motorcycle's snarl dissolved into silence. Somewhere far above, the first plane blinked a domestic red across the new night. Arya stretched long and loose, the ache of Rafe's absence no longer raw, just honest. The hunger to be met, not controlled, not concealed, met coiled in her belly like a good engine. "Onward," she said to nobody and everything, and meant it. Like this video, subscribe, more stories like this are coming.